It's one of those losses that feels like the end of an era, a quiet fading of a light that illuminated Hollywood for generations, isn't it? This morning, September 16, 2025, the world bids farewell to Robert Redford, the iconic actor, director, and environmental champion who passed away peacefully in his sleep at his beloved home in Sundance, Utah, at the age of 89. Surrounded by the mountains he cherished and the family he held dear, Redford slipped away without fanfare, his publicist confirming the news with a simple, heartfelt statement that asked for privacy in this time of grief. No specific cause was shared, but reports suggest it was a natural passing, the kind that comes after a life fully lived, full of adventure, artistry, and quiet conviction. You can almost imagine him there in those final moments, gazing out at the snow-capped peaks, a faint smile on his face, as if reflecting on the wild rides and deep friendships that defined him. From outrunning the law with Paul Newman to championing indie voices through Sundance. It's a poignant reminder of how even the most enduring stars eventually take their bow, leaving us to replay the scenes that made them immortal. But rather than linger in the ache, let's honor him by stepping back into the rich tapestry of his life. The stories that shaped a man who was as much a force of nature as the landscapes he fought to protect. Born Charles Robert Redford Jr. on August 18, 1936, in the sun-soaked sprawl of Santa Monica, California, Robert entered a world still shadowed by the Great Depression. Into a modest family where dreams were as much about survival as aspiration. His father, Charles Sr., started as a milkman before climbing to an accountant role at Standard Oil, the kind of steady job that kept the lights on in their multicultural neighborhood of Van Nuys, where young Robert absorbed the rhythms of diverse voices and stories from all walks of life. His mother, Martha, was the dreamer in the family, instilling in him a love for literature and films through endless library visits, hours spent in the children's section devouring Greek and Roman myths that would later echo in his choice of roles. Those epic tales of heroes and hubris. But Robert wasn't the picture of a future star. He was a scrappy kid, stealing hubcaps in high school for thrills, excelling at baseball until a college scholarship at the University of Colorado slipped away due to too many late nights and youthful indiscretions. Expelled and adrift, he wandered to Europe in his early 20s, embracing a bohemian life in places like Paris and Rome, sketching in cafes, debating politics with artists, and discovering a passion for theater that pulled him back to the States. He studied at the Pratt Institute in New York and the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, honing his craft on Broadway stages with roles in plays like The Highest Tree and Tall Story, where his boyish charm and quiet intensity caught eyes. By the early 1960s, Hollywood beckoned, starting with small TV spots on shows like Maverick and The Twilight Zone, but it was his breakout in Barefoot in the Park, opposite Jane Fonda in 1967, that announced him as a leading man, effortless, magnetic, the all-American guy with a depth that hinted at storms beneath the surface. From there, the 1970s became his golden age, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969 with Paul Newman. A buddy film so electric it grossed over $100 million and birthed a lifelong friendship built on pranks and mutual respect, The Way We Were in 1973 with Barbra Streisand, capturing the ache of lost love amid political turmoil. The Sting that same year, a con artist caper that earned him an Oscar nod and showcased his sly wit, and All the President's Men in 1976, where he played Bob Woodward with a dogged intensity that helped expose Watergate, proving he could tackle real-world grit as deftly as fantasy. Behind the camera, his directorial debut, Ordinary People, in 1980 swept the Oscars, including Best Director for its raw portrayal of family grief, a film so personal it felt like therapy on screen. He kept evolving, directing A River Runs Through It in 1992, a lyrical ode to fly fishing and brotherhood starring Brad Pitt, or Quiz Show in 1994, a sharp look at 1950s TV scandals. Even in later years, he starred in The Old Man and the Gun in 2018 at 82, playing a charming bank robber in what he called his final acting role, though he'd later cameo in projects like Avengers: Endgame. As a nod to his enduring legacy, Awards piled up: an Academy Award for directing, a Lifetime Achievement Oscar in 2002, BAFTAs, Golden Globes, the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Obama in 2016. But Robert always seemed more at home in the wild than on red carpets, using his platform to fight for the environment and independent film. Founding the Sundance Institute in 1981, he turned a Utah ski resort into a haven for storytellers, launching careers like Quentin Tarantino's and Steven Soderbergh's, proving that one man's vision could reshape an industry. It was a life of reinvention, from rebellious youth to Hollywood lion, always chasing authenticity over acclaim. At the heart of it all, though, was a family that both anchored and tested him, a circle marked by profound joys and heartbreaking losses that shaped his empathy and drive. Robert's first marriage to Lola Van Wagenen in 1958, a historian he met at Brigham Young University when she was just 17, lasted 27 years and produced 4 children. Blending his showbiz world with her grounded Mormon roots, he even converted briefly, though he later drifted from organized religion. Their son Scott Anthony, born in 1959, was gone too soon at 2.5 months from sudden infant death syndrome, a tragedy that left Robert guilt-ridden and private about his pain, burying the boy in Provo and channeling the grief into his work's emotional depth. Daughter Shauna Jean arrived in 1960, growing into a talented painter who married journalist Eric Schlosser, author of Fast Food Nation, and gave Robert 2 grandchildren, Micah and Connor, both now pursuing creative paths that echo the family's artistic vein. Son David James Jamie Redford, born in 1962, became a filmmaker and activist in his own right, co-founding the Redford Center to spotlight environmental docs, but he passed in 2020 at 58 from bile duct cancer. A loss that hit Robert hard, especially after Jamie's own battles with health issues from childhood liver problems. Their daughter Amy Hart, born in 1970, followed her dad into acting and directing, starring in films like Tristan and Isolde and producing indie projects, married to musician Mark Mann with 3 daughters, Grace, Eden, and Lena, who grew up immersed in the arts, much like their grandfather's influence. The marriage to Lola ended in 1985 amid the strains of fame, but they remained amicable co-parents. Robert found love again with artist Sibylle Szaggars in 1988, a German painter whose quiet strength complemented his, leading to a private wedding in 2009 at Sundance after years together. Sibylle became his muse and partner in environmental causes, sharing a life of creativity and seclusion, often spotted at galas arm-in-arm, but preferring the intimacy of home. Robert spoke rarely of his half-brother William, who worked in medical research, keeping the family tight-knit yet out of the spotlight. Through the heartbreaks, like losing 2 sons, he leaned on these bonds, teaching his kids that legacy isn't just fame, but the stories and values passed down, like fly fishing trips that bonded father and son or quiet evenings debating films. It was a family forged in resilience, where loss deepened love and creativity became a shared language, reminding us all that behind the silver screen icon was a man who cherished the real connections most. That devotion to the personal wove into his lifestyle too, a blend of rugged simplicity and thoughtful indulgence that mirrored the American West he adored, far from Hollywood's glitz, rooted in the earth and the everyday wonders. Robert lived much of his life at his Sundance Ranch in Utah's Wasatch Mountains, a sprawling 5,000-acre haven he bought in the 1960s and transformed into an eco-resort and artist retreat, complete with ski slopes, hiking trails, and organic farms where he'd spend mornings tending gardens or casting lines in nearby streams. It wasn't ostentation, it was sanctuary, a home with stone fireplaces, walls lined with Western art and family photos, a grand piano for impromptu jazz sessions. He was an amateur musician at heart, and a kitchen where Sibylle's paintings hung alongside simple meals of fresh trout or homegrown salads. He drove practical cars like Jeeps for mountain treks, not limos, and his wardrobe stayed timeless. Denim shirts, cowboy boots, that signature tousled hair turning silver with grace. Environmentally, he was a pioneer, serving as a trustee for the Natural Resources Defense Council, fighting pipelines like Keystone XL with documentaries and lobbying, and co-founding the Redford Center to amplify voices on climate change. Actions born from childhood trips to Texas visiting his grandfather, where the vast plains ignited a lifelong passion for conservation. Politically liberal, he supported causes quietly, donating millions to indigenous rights and clean energy, often escaping to Europe for inspiration or New York for theater, but always returning to Utah's solitude. Health-wise, he stayed active into his 80s, skiing, painting watercolors, playing tennis, eschewing excesses for balance, though he admitted to youthful wildness like drinking and minor scrapes. His net worth at the time of passing hovered around $200 million, amassed from blockbuster salaries, like $3 million for The Sting, directing fees, Sundance royalties, and smart investments in real estate and indie films. But he lived modestly, funneling wealth into philanthropy rather than flash. Weekends might mean mentoring young filmmakers at Sundance Labs or hosting barbecues with Fonda and Newman's Memory and Toasts, embodying a bon vivant ethos where joy came from nature's rhythm, not the spotlight's glare. It was a life of purposeful restraint, the kind that whispers true wealth is in the land you preserve and the lives you touch, not the dollars in the bank. Of course, no tribute to Robert would be complete without those vivid anecdotes that capture his spirit, the off-screen moments that reveal the man behind the myth. Remember how he and Paul Newman turned Butch Cassidy into more than a movie, a bromance sealed with elaborate pranks, like Newman hiding Redford's script pages during rehearsals, only for Robert to retaliate by filling his trailer with fake snakes. Their laughter echoing on set like the film's banter? Or that time in the 1960s, fresh off Broadway, when he turned down The Graduate because he felt too old at 30 to play a naive kid, quipping later, "I never looked like a 21-year-old who'd never been laid." A self-deprecating wit that endeared him to peers. Directing Ordinary People, he drew from his own family grief over Scott, pushing Timothy Hutton to raw tears in takes that blurred art and life, earning that Oscar with a humble shrug. It's about the story, not me. His friendship with Jane Fonda spanned decades, from Barefoot Flirtations to 2017's Our Souls at Night, where they'd reminisce over coffee about activism, her calling him the brother I never had. Environmentally, there was the quiet victory of blocking a developer from his Sundance land in the 70s, turning potential condos into preserved wilderness, a story he'd tell over campfires with grandkids, emphasizing stewardship. He regretted little, maybe the burnout from 70s overwork, but spun it into Sundance, joking in interviews about preferring Utah's silence to Hollywood's noise. Even in his 80s, he'd surprise friends with a sudden painting session, capturing mountain sunsets that hung in his home like personal diaries. As he faced the end, surrounded by loved ones at Sundance, it felt like the perfect curtain call, a life of bold choices, deep loyalties, and unyielding grace. His $200 million fortune? Mere numbers. The real riches were the myths he helped create, the lands he saved, and the hearts he moved. As we reflect on Robert Redford's extraordinary journey, from Santa Monica streets to Sundance peaks, I hope it inspires you to chase your own stories with the same quiet fire, a hike in the woods, a film that stirs the soul, or simply holding family close. He showed us that true stardom lies in authenticity and impact, leaving a legacy that outshines any screen. If this moved you, give the video a like to share his light, and subscribe for more tales of lives that linger. Thanks for being here, keep dreaming big, and take care.